So let's begin. I'm going to move this over. So jivas, like waves in the sea, come into being, rise and fall, fight against each other and die. So jivas being individuated points of experience. A jiva, the essence of a jiva is pure infinite consciousness. The jiva specifically is pointing to the individuated experience of consciousness, which is what we would call a soul. Striking against the seashore, waves recede, tired and worn out, seeking rest and peace. Likewise, jivas seek the supreme in various ways. So what he's saying is individuated consciousness enters the world, gets tired and worn out because it's seeking the source, it's seeking the resting place of the ocean of being. And he's suggesting that jivas are exactly the same. Individuated points of experience are looking to come back into the ocean of being. Waves have their birth, life, and death in the sea itself, jivas in the Lord. Waves have their birth, their life, but they never leave the ocean of being. Likewise, jivas, individuated points of experience, seem to leave the ocean of being, but never really do. And jivas come back, individuated points of experience, come back into pure infinite being. Waves are nothing but water. So is the sea. Likewise, the jiva and the Lord are nothing other than Sat, Chit, Ananda. So what he's saying there is, like I just described, the jiva and the Lord, so your individuated point of experience and the totality of infinite being are absolute bliss, infinite consciousness, no separation. And they are the same essence. So it's like saying that, you've heard the quote, from probably a super famous Sufi poet. I can't believe I can't remember his name. But he said that you are not a drop. You're not a drop in the ocean. You're an ocean in a drop. Someone remind me who said that? Or
Rumi.
we all Rumi, thank you. So quote from Rumi. So that is essentially what he's saying there, is that we're not just a drop. We are the ocean, right? It's a concession to say that we are a drop, the ocean in a drop. We're not the ocean in a drop. The ocean isn't really in a drop. There is no drop. There is only the ocean, you see? So this is what he's saying there. The individuated point of experience, or the soul, or the individual focus of the self, is absolutely just the ocean. There is no individual. There's just the ocean, you see? And what we appoint to as individuality, that's the one that we refer to as ourself, the sense of ourself, the sense of being, the sense of I, that isn't the drop. That sense is the absolute ocean itself, you see? Is that clear? Then waves realize that the sea is their common support. All fight ceases. So when the waves realize that the ocean is their being, there is no turbulence with everything. Much is not gained thereby. This is not the final word. Work lies ahead to remove the sense of separateness. So as we've been doing in our meditations, knowing that isn't enough. A glimpse of our true nature, the knowledge of being, the absolute, is not enough to remove the conditioning itself. When water is realized, wave and sea vanish. What appeared as two is thus realized as one. You see? When we recognize the drop is made of water, when we recognize ourself is made of being, there is no self separate from being, there is no individual separate from being. Water can be reached straight away from wave by following the direct path. If the way through sea is taken, much more is needed. So what he's suggesting is that we can go directly to our being. We don't have to take we can go directly to water. We don't have to go to the ocean, which is the world of 10,000 things. They're the progressive path. They're the paths that typically require the practice and decades of seeking. This path is not a seeking approach. This is the end of seeking. We just go to the water. We don't look at the ocean and label it as the ocean. We just go straight to this is water, you see? If we take the approach through the sea, much more time is needed. Quest regarding the cause of the world meaningless. No question can be there regarding the time, place, and cause of the origin of this world, for these themselves form parts of the world. So nothing can be any concept as to the origin, like the Big Bang or anything like that, is another concept that takes place in the world. There is no cause of the world. The world experience is absolutely causeless. There cannot be a cause. The question seeks to have an explanation of the whole in terms of its part. This can never be a logical question. So essentially, when people are looking for meaning, when people are looking for why is there existence, how did it come to be, they're asking a question that is on the level of cause and effect. So in other words, it's like the mind is asking a question on the level that it exists, but the world was not created on the level in which it exists, you see? So it's like infinite being. It's like a limited thing. It's like a character in the movie asking, why does this movie exist? It can never comprehend anything outside of the movie. The level on which it asks the question is in a completely alternate dimension to the cause from which the movie took place. So no one in the movie is going to be able to answer that question because they are a character that exists in the movie. We cannot know anything about, no one in the movie can know anything about the screen. There's no cause for that. What's your question, James?
Yeah, I had some doubts about 2.1. I think you've partially answered them, but could you possibly make clear why there can be no question regarding the origin?
So would you agree that that awareness is not an objective experience?
Yes.
So would you agree that awareness is the source of experience?
Yes.
So would you agree that the only experience of a world is experience, right?
Yes.
All there is, so in other words, all there is to the world is experience. So the source of experience is awareness. Now we know nothing other than our direct experience. So awareness is the experience of the world, and it's all there is to experience. And we know by self-evidence that there is no object in awareness. Awareness is not an objective experience, but it is the source of experience. And objects imply cause, maintenance, effect, and dissolution. In other words, they imply time, they imply space, they imply that something was created and something come to an end. Awareness was not created and does not come to an end. Awareness cannot be turned on, it cannot be turned off. It is pure causelessness. So that's all the world is made of. So when we ask how was that created, we're asking a question inside the plane of cause and effect, which cannot answer causelessness. It cannot, it's like objects cannot ask a question from the place that they exist about how they exist. Because the place that they come from, they don't really exist, you see? The place that they come from is absolute objectless being, existence. So any question as to how that arose is redundant, because it cannot be. It's like the question implies that there was a cause, but there isn't a cause to awareness because it's not an object. Is that making sense, James?
Parts of it make sense. To me, I can understand if there isn't an answer to that question. I can also understand if the question itself is futile, but I don't fully understand why there can be no question about it at all.
No, there can be a question, but what he's trying to say is that we want when we ask that question, we're looking for an answer that gives reason. But the place from which the question would have to be answered has no reason. You see, it's causeless. So to ask, why is there causelessness? It's almost a redundant question, you see? I'll come to you in just a moment, Taylor.
Yeah, I kind of see what you're saying.
Taylor, do you have something to add?
Possibly. Are you saying that the world of cause and effect is connected to space-time, where awareness exists outside of space-time?
Yes.
Talking about cause and effect doesn't apply to it because space-time is contained within awareness.
Exactly. So you cannot. So yes, you're absolutely right. There cannot be a question. I mean, you can ask the question, but we have to realize that the question can never have an actual answer because the question exists in the place of cause and effect, but that place of cause and effect was created by causelessness. Does that make sense, James?
I mean, yeah, partially. Mostly.
What's the part that doesn't?
It's hard to say.
Sinners.
It sounds just like a pointless question to ask because yeah, I don't.
Sinners, do you wanna add or add something?
Yeah, like I wanted to like just give give a try to like maybe make it a bit more accessible. Is that the like how I understand it is that the sense of the whole idea of questions and words and stuff like this is like part of is like created by experience. So like kind of the realm that we're like trying to like talk about with words, it's not affected by that. I don't know if that helps or if that makes sense. Or so it's like a different it's like if I talk about a recipe, you know, like I'm talking about food, and then I can't explain to you like what it's like to taste that actually if you have never tasted the recipe before. So it's like on a different level. Does that make sense or more
Yeah,
confusion?
I understand what you're saying. It's almost like what you're saying is it's on a different dimension. The question takes place on a different dimension that cannot be accessed. I think the point is here is that he's just saying that people who ask for what is the meaning of life? Why is there existence? It's a question that is implied on the level in which there is meaning. Asking a question from which meaning does not exist. Cause does not exist, you see?
Yeah, exactly. Like existence is, and then the question of like yes or no, it's like dependent on existence.
Exactly. So
Like
if we were to
that's
imagine, yeah. So if we were to go back to the king and the pauper, it's like the pauper asking, why do I exist? The pauper doesn't exist. The pauper is always the king. So the pauper can never ask the question as to why I exist, because the pauper isn't there existing to begin with. The pauper is the king. You see? Is this kind of getting more clear, Jay? Is everyone else on board with this, by the way, this aspect?
Yeah, I think it makes sense to me now. So
Okay.
essentially, it's a question we can put forward, but we can't answer it because it's beyond our capability to do so. Because
Yeah.
the question itself comes from, you could say, a lower place than we could find the answer.
Yes, exactly. And that's the wisdom in asking the question, though. The reason he shares this is because what he's actually doing is making a point that the world is causeless. He's making a point that if we try to ask this question, isn't it interesting that we can't get an answer? Isn't it interesting that this one thing just takes us directly to causelessness? And we realize that the difference between the level of the mind, the dimension of the mind, and the dimension of spaceless, causeless consciousness. So the question as to who superimposes doership upon oneself is also not a proper question. The very act of superimposition presupposes a doer. Therefore, this question is also illogical. So the question as to who superimposes doership. So the question as to who does things, who's doing things in the world, is not a question, because the question already makes the presumption that there is a doer when there is not. So in other words, the question as to who does things in the world presupposes that there is an actual person doing things when there isn't. There's just one infinite experience, nothing being done and nothing to do. There's just pure experiencing. You see, like, do you do the watching of a movie? It's like saying who's doing the movie. There's no. It's like we're presupposing that something's being done when it's not. 3.1 consciousness going out towards objects is mind. That which turns towards the self is pure sattva. Sattva, if I remember correctly, is thought turning towards itself. Do you want to double check that, James, on the glossary if you have it?
That is correct, yeah.
So consciousness going out towards objects is mind. So in other words, consciousness perceiving the world, or everything perceived, is mind, which means sight, smells, touches, tastes, whatever other senses we have, they're all pure mind. That's what we call the mind. So we can say the mind is a localization of consciousness. That which turns around and recognizes itself, recognizes its being alive, is pure being, pure sattva. It's pure being. There's no mind involved in that process. It is the opinion of the wise that the mind is avidya meaning ignorance, and pure sattva, vidya. Sattva meaning knowledge or right knowledge. Vidya alone is the means of liberation. So right knowledge alone is the means of liberation. In other words, recognizing the nature of the one that is alive alone means as the means of liberation. Yeah, James?
I just wanted to clarify, when they use the word mind, they're not referring to the physical object in my head, or are they referring to something else?
Mind is everything that you can possibly perceive as an object. That includes thoughts, images, memories. That includes feelings and sensations. That includes sights, sounds, and smells. Anything that you could experience that is possible to experience is the mind. It's a form of the mind. Is everyone else clear on that?
Okay. Yeah,
So
cool.
even touch is a form of mind.
Yes, because it's sensation. So
It's
if you were to
not
close your eyes and not, if you close your eyes right now, remove the concept objects from all objects and just touch your leg, and obviously again remove the concept arm and leg, there's just raw sensation. And if you were to do the same thing on the table, it's just raw sensation. We know nothing of an object experience, just the sensation of it. Same with sound. We hear nothing of the object, we just hear the sound.
Isn't the sensation an object of mind? It seems like the mind is what's having the experience of, say, touching my leg.
Yeah.
That's intuitively it seems. But you're saying the actual experience of, say, touching my leg is mind itself.
All experience is made of, we could label it as mind. In other words, the mind is a temporary vibration of pure consciousness. So yes, we label it the mind to be able to distinguish absolute and limitation, absolute and form. And everything that we experience that includes sensations is a localized vibration of consciousness, made only of consciousness, arising only from consciousness. But we put a little label on it and we just call it sensation. And sensation is the mind is consciousness. Does that make sense? Does that sound clear? The path of avidya leads to bondage. So the aspirant must take the path of vidya for liberation. For eternal peace, persistent striving is necessary till enlightenment. So for eternal peace, persistently striving for I would suggest that what he's saying here is persistently striving to recognize the significance of happiness is necessary until unconditional happiness takes place. Does that all sound clear? Cool. He whose mind is captivated by the beauty of a figure sculptured in a piece of rock forgets even the fact of the rock being its background. So he who is captivated by the form of the rock forgets that it's made of rock. When he rises above this captivation and looks at the figure, he sees the background rock which supports the figure. Everyone understanding that analogy so far? I'm going to elaborate in a minute, but I think that I should continue before I do. When the rock thus receives attention, so when you take your attention from the figure, the shape, to the rock itself, rock is seen also in the figure. And later on, the figure is seen as nothing other than the rock. Enlightenment of the truth also comes in this manner. Consciousness becomes dimmed chiefly through one's captivation and abiding interest in external objects. So consciousness becomes endarkened chiefly, briefly, through one's captivation in the figure, in objects in the world, and abiding interest in the figure itself. You see, abiding interest in the concepts that we have shaped consciousness with. You see, when one outgrows this interest and looks at the objects, it will be found that they arise and abide in consciousness alone. When one outgrows this interest, when one has seen that my captivation and abiding interest in the world of objective experience has thus brought me so much suffering. one 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 takes the path towards recognizing the substance of suffering and the substance of objects, which is consciousness alone. Everyone clear on that? You were looking at me blankly. I'm not sure if
So you're saying you grow tired of the forms of the world and you become more interested in what the forms arise from, consciousness.
Yes, and that is the thirst. We all have this thirst. We all have this thirst. What is this thirst? It's because we're seduced by the five senses of experience, but we overlook the one fundamental sense of being from which all sense of the world is experienced. And when we are seduced by that, when we are captivated or have abiding interest in these five senses of experience, we start to thirst for the pure consciousness from which these experiences arise. When consciousness thus begins to receive, due attention, which is what we're all doing here now, giving it due attention, it becomes revealed in the objects as well. And they themselves will in due course become transformed into consciousness. Now, this is a concession. Nothing gets transformed into consciousness. When you're looking at a statue and then you recognize it's made of rock or marble, it didn't transform into marble. You just realized it was marble, right? So in other words, the more time we spend, this is what we call the heart opener, these meditations that go into the being aspect of experience. The more the being aspect of experience is almost drip fed into the content of our experience, the more then objects shine with being. And that's what we call pure meditation. Meditation is usually when our self is absorbed in itself and there's no thought replacing it. And even if thought appears again, there's no disturbance, there's no fluctuation in this pure experience of being. So thinking that can then take place. Thinking can then take place. Sensations can then take place. Sounds can then take place. And there's just this flatline field of being in the fluctuation of daily experience. So what he's saying here is exactly that. The more we spend in being, the more obvious being becomes, so to speak. So then the more we are able to recognize being in the experience of objects. You see? It is the realization of oneself and the entire world as one consciousness that is known as the realization of truth. That one's kind of self-explanatory. I would suggest the realization of oneself and the world as one is happiness. But let's not we can't mistake that experience as the be-all end-all. It's not. It's not the be-all end-all. It's the necessary glimpse that then we cooperate with. And this is where this is where something very specific is important to know. It's not the experience of the realization of truth itself that bears significance. It's in understanding its significance that makes it an unconditional experience. This is why we've all likely had glimpses of our true nature, glimpses of our being. And I'd add that a lot of people have, but this alone wasn't enough to stop suffering. This alone wasn't enough to keep that experience and realization of truth consistent in one's day-to-day experience. Does that all sound clear? The deep sleep, nirvikalpa samadhi, in the natural state. It is in consciousness that objects arise. Therefore, when they disappear, what remains over is this consciousness and nothing else. So it is in consciousness that objects arise. So if we take thoughts, for example, it is in consciousness that thought arises. Therefore, when they disappear, what remains is consciousness. And that applies to everything. It's easier to see it with a thought. If we take the thought breathing, pure consciousness is there prior to the thought, it's there in the thought, and it's there when the thought disappears. There's a silence. Nothing replaces the thought when you think it, for a moment at least. That pure silence is pure consciousness. It's not nothingness. We think, oh, there's nothing replacing the thought. There is something replacing the thought. Pure consciousness replaces it, you see? But because it's not an object, we don't perceive it as an object. Therefore, we don't notice it. You see? If this truth takes deep root in thought, deep sleep, giving up its character of veiling the reality, becomes transformed into nirvikalpa samadhi. So if this truth takes deep root in thought, in other words, if you keep your attention on that, in deep sleep, giving up its character of veiling reality becomes transformed into nirvikalpa samadhi. So in other words, deep sleep is the experience of pure, unconditional, unconditioned being, not being replaced by an object, which appears to us as no experience. Therefore, we mistake it for nothingness, or we mistake it for nothing happening at all. But there is something there. It's the experience of pure consciousness. That's what we call nirvikalpa samadhi. All clear on that? Taylor, do you want to ask something?
Yeah, I don't. Are you talking literally about deep sleep?
Yeah,
Or like just being
literally deep sleep.
okay.
Yeah.
So if this truth takes deep root in thought, deep sleep, giving up its character of veiling the reality, becomes transformed into okay. That Sanskrit word. Yeah, is there more coming after that? Because I don't really understand. I don't understand that. What that is.
So deep sleep is essentially where the experience of the world, which is the experience of the mind, is temporarily paused completely. And in that complete pausing of the mind, deep sleep occurs. And deep sleep is the experience where there is absolutely zero experience of an objective world.
So
And
between,
sorry?
Between dreams, then that's what you mean.
Yes, but there's something to add to that. There is actually only the experience of deep sleep. Now, if you were to imagine a piece of paper, okay, white piece of paper, and you were to have dreaming and waking, you have a red sheet and a blue sheet. And what you're going to do is you're on this white sheet of paper, you're going to put the red sheet in the center and the blue sheet on the right-hand side. So now you've got three colors. You've got white, red, and blue, okay? Now, it looks like there's three colors, right? Or three states. But notice that there's only two, the red and the blue, waking and dreaming. The state, it looks like there's another state on the right that's separate from the others, but that's actually the background on which the waking and the dreaming exist. So where it looks like we have these different states, we have dreaming, deep sleep, waking state. The dreaming and the waking state both are colorings of the background of deep sleep, which is nirvikalpa samadhi, which is absolute consciousness. You see?
Yeah, I understand.
Cool. When objects are also realized as nothing other than consciousness, one comes back into one's true nature, which is changeless and above all states, including samadhi. So like I just described, when we realize the white background, which isn't itself a state, right? It's not a state, it appears to be a state from the point of view of the red or the blue state, or the, I've just made those colors up just to distinguish the metaphor, the waking and the dreaming state, you see? What we're doing is the experience of recognizing our being is like recognizing the canvas in which all experience takes place, which is the deep sleep state. So when we recognize the canvas in the waking state, we call that samadhi. You don't need to learn the word samadhi. There's no, we're just going with happiness and peace here. Witness of jiva. Only what has been perceived before can come up in memory. The embodied I who perceived, did, or enjoyed anything also comes up in memory at times. From this, it follows that the embodied I was witnessed by another I principle at the time of this perception, action, or enjoyment. It is this witnessing I that is the real I. Fixing attention there and establishing oneself in it, one becomes free of bondage. So, if we think back to a time where you enjoyed something, right? I enjoyed the matcha I drank earlier, let's just say. When we think back to that memory, we are witnessing an enjoyer of the matcha. Is that part clear so far? Now, we are not the one enjoying the matcha. We are the one witnessing the experience of enjoying the matcha. So what he's saying is that all memory appears to be an individual enjoyer or an individual doer or experiencer. But we are that which witnesses the witness. We are that which witnesses the one that was enjoying. So we weren't really enjoying. There's no real enjoyer. There's no real doer. We are that which witnesses the enjoying and the doing happening. Does that sound clear? And notice that you are there now witnessing the memory. You are the same one that witnessed the enjoyer in that memory is the same one there right now witnessing the memory of you enjoying. You see? Do you see the common thread? That true I, the true I in that experience, which is the absolute witnessing presence that is completely separate from. It's like recognizing that you are the screen in which the enjoyment took place or the movie took place, you see? Everyone clear on that before I move on? James?
So you're saying that the first person is only in awareness, and the I that we commonly talk about is something which we actually perceive in the third person.
Say the question again, the last part. I was with you and then I didn't understand the last part.
Yeah, so when we talk about the I that can do things, this I is actually, we're talking about something else. We're not truly talking about ourselves. Who we are, who we truly are, the true I is only in awareness and nothing else.
Yes, you're right. But what I would also add is that what we did, like if we go back to the memory of enjoying the matcha, we thought to ourselves, I am enjoying the matcha, right? We might not have thought that specifically, but that was our experience, right? In terms of like what we were believing was happening. When we referred to the I, we were referring to the actual witness. But what we did was we synonymously contracted that witness into a localized point of view and said that it was enjoying the matcha. But really, the experience was the I was actually the one witnessing that process happening. So the I is always that which is witnessing, experiencing all experience, even the experience that I am enjoying the matcha.
Okay.
Sound clear?
Yeah.
Taylor, you look a little bit more confused.
It's a question of identity. What we're which level of I we're identifying with. There's the personality I, who I usually am identified with Taylor drinking the tea, but saying there's actually a level of I that's the actual real self. And so it's a question of recognizing that you can identify with that instead of the personality. Is that what you're getting at?
Yes, I wouldn't suggest to identify with it, because you don't need to identify with it, right? You can only identify with an object. So we don't want to make an object of ourself, because our self is not an object. So instead of identifying with it, we just recognize it's what we are. If identification then is natural, if that is supposed to happen, you see, there's no but yes, you're right. But the sense of being that you had, that you were enjoying the match, the you part of it was the experience of pure objectless being. But then you quickly, very quickly, just associated and attached that pure witnessing to a limited, finite part of experience, which was enjoying the matcha, you see?
So then you become identified with the personality level. And think that
Yes,
the body, the personality and body drinking the tea instead of the witness of the entire experience.
exactly, exactly. But the thing to notice is the I is always the same. It wasn't the I experience that you had was the real I. It's just you very quickly, you covered it, so to speak. You veiled it with a very quick sensory experience, you see? So it is this witnessing I that is real, the real I. Fixing attention there, which we do in these meditations when we go into being, and this is what I refer to as being alive, that being alive aspect of your experience is the real I. If you take away all content and objective experience from it and labels, it's pure being alive. Establishing one's self there, one becomes free of bondage. So establishing ourselves in the raw experience of being alive, the true, what it truly means to be alive, one becomes free of bondage, of suffering. We'll do this last, maybe these last sections, and then we'll finish up because I have a call directly after it. The light of perception of sense objects is the changeless Atma, the one without a second which abides in filling all. So Atma here is essentially your direct experience of being alive. The experience that you have of being alive is the Atma. The light of perception, the light in the perception, so the awareness of all sense perceptions is the changeless Atma, which is changeless being. The one without a second, which abides in filling all, which abides as the essence of all things. To see it as it is, the objects must be separated from it, or else they must be made to point towards it. The I must be removed from the body to Atma. Freedom from bondage, peace, and happiness will flow from it. So exactly like you just said, Taylor, the I, we must remove the I from the body, like you're just experiencing, and recognize it to actually be the sense of being alive itself, which is not an objective experience. And this is where peace and happiness is found, because that is unlimited. It's an unlimited identity then, so to speak. You see? All clear on that, guys? So what it's saying here is objects must be separated from it. So what he's saying is it's necessary as a concession to separate the objects of experience from the raw experience of being, in order then to come back into experience and recognize all objects are made of being. Atma is that changeless one rasa, which I'm going to need glossary on that if you can, please, James, into which thoughts and feelings merge. To see it, enter it, and establish it as the I removes all delusions and brings lasting peace. So the raw experience of being alive is that one changeless, what's rasa, James?
Unbroken peace and harmony.
Gotcha. So the experience of being alive is that changeless one peace and harmony into which all thoughts and feelings merge. To see it, enter it, and establish it as the I. So establish being alive as what you are. You are the experience of being alive. Being, you are the experience of existence, knowing itself. There's nothing else to add to it, nothing else to take away from it. That is what you essentially are. We break that down into language. It sounds like there's three separate things: being, alive, knowing myself. They're all one experience, but we're using very limited poetic language to establish that. Sinners?
Yeah, one quick question on that, just to come back to the deep sleep and that, so like anchoring ourselves in that sense of being alive. Is there any utility in kind of like subtracting that from the experience of deep sleep? If you said that is like the experience of pure consciousness, if I followed that correctly, or is that useful in any way?
Could you ask the last part again?
So like if I'm having, because it said there that the experience of being alive is what we're after, to anchor the I, the sense of existence, into that.
Mm-hmm.
Then how does it relate to the experience of deep sleep, which before was said is like the experience of pure consciousness, right?
Mm-hmm. That would be the experience of deep sleep. That would be the pure experience of being. So that would be your direct experience of what takes place in deep sleep.
Yeah.
And that does not start around. That is actually the only experience we have, is being alive. So you could say deep sleep is being alive. Deep sleep is the proof that we exist independently of objective experience. In other words, we exist independently of a functioning mind or a functioning world of experience. Does that make sense? That sound clear?
Not quite, no. But
Okay.
maybe it's too big for now. I was just like curious if that is like helpful, that there's like, because yeah, this is something like, is that don't have like there are certain things that I do not have access to in deep sleep, like for example memory, things like that. But then the idea of kind of being alive, my understanding of being alive is kind of like connected to a lot of like sense experiences and things like that.
Yeah.
So I wonder if it's useful to kind of like compare those two experiences to kind of like get a deeper sense or deeper understanding of what it is meant by this kind of like to anchor the I in the, and so on. Thank you.
Yeah. So the experience of suffering is caused by misunderstanding what it means to be alive. So the essence of what I'm sharing and teaching is that we have mistaken what it means to be alive. So the reason that you're having this kind of conflict is because you have mistaken what it means to be alive. Being alive is not an experience of the body, the mind having a world experience. That's where suffering takes place. That's the reason suffering takes place, is because of that belief. So what we need to experience, and what we're doing here in this approach that I'm sharing, is recognizing that being alive is actually completely independent of objective experience. We're not alive, being alive, because there is a world, because life takes place, because my heart's beating, lungs are breathing. We're being alive primarily, regardless of if there's a world or not, we are infinite life. And that experience of being alive is simply this: being, to exist, and alive, to know or be aware of that existence. That's it. There's nothing else to it. It's not because the heart's beating and lungs are breathing. It's because I exist and I know of that existence. And that experience is what we actually are having of being alive. That's the actual experience of being alive. And that's exactly the experience of deep sleep. You see?
Yeah. I don't experience being alive when I'm in deep sleep, or not really
Okay.
aware of that.
Yes,
Yeah,
because
but
you've
that's a
associated. Yes, the reason for that is because you've associated being alive with objective experience. So you say, well, I don't experience a world in deep sleep, so I must not have the experience of being alive in deep sleep. You see what I mean? Obviously, you don't have the experience of being alive in deep sleep if you believe being alive is the world and experience. So in deep sleep, there is no world or experience. So that's why you're having the cessation of being alive in the experience of deep sleep. But if you recognize that being alive is simply the non-objective experience of being, knowing itself, without any object replacing it, any object taking place, you would have the experience of being alive in deep sleep, because that's exactly what being alive is, and that's what deep sleep is.
So you're saying I do know myself as experience in deep sleep,
Yes, you do.
but I don't remember it. Okay,
Yes, you don't remember
fair
it because you
enough.
can only remember objects. But you do know it. You don't need to remember it. Because
Gotcha.
the fact that you know nothing takes place is your evidence that you were there, rendering the knowledge that nothing happened. If you didn't know nothing happened, if you in order to even say and ask the question that I know nothing took place there, life didn't happen there, I wasn't being alive there, well, you were aware that you weren't being alive there, so to speak. So you were present there in the moment, but because there was no objective experience, you can't say, and I qualify my proof with the memory that this object was there. You can't do that. You just have to know it. You see? Usually we validate proof with some form of proof and evidence, which is always an object. This is an experience you just have to know. You just raw dog know it. You can't prove it with a memory or with any type of thing other than you were present there by rendering the fact that you knew nothing took place. You see?
Gotcha. What's the next step from there?
I've got to jump. I am 3 minutes late for my next call. So let's pick up this again. I'll schedule this for the next time. Can everyone make this time next week?
Yes, I can.
Yeah. Okay, perfect. I'll see you guys next week. Sorry, I've got to jump. Sinez, save what you just shared, and we will pick up from where you just asked that next week. Does that sound good?
Great. Thank you.
Perfect. Awesome.
Thank
Thank you so much, guys. I'll see you
Cheers,
very
Saja.
soon. You're
Bye-bye.
welcome. Take care.